Hello and a very warm welcome to the brand new edition of Policy Watch. I'm Kriti Mishra. Today we'll analyse two important developments, merger of banks and smart fence pilot project. First up, the topic of merger of banks. The government has announced the amalgamation of three public sector lenders, Bank of Baroda, Dena Bank and Vijay Bank. The merged entity will have a combined business of 14.82 lakh crore rupees, making it the third largest bank after SBI and ICICI. Finance Minister Arun Jaitley has assured capital support to the merged entity. This proposed merger is seen as part of government's endeavour to push credit and economic growth. And to shed more light on the topic, I'm joined by Mr. R. Gopalan, former Secretary Financial Services, Ministry of Finance, and also Puja Mehra, Senior Economic Journalist. Welcome to Pratsabha Television, both of you. Let me begin by asking you, sir, what was the rationale behind choosing these banks for merger?
Well, I would say that when you take a merger, do a merger, you must look at the complementarity of operations, capabilities, so that somebody is in one geographic zone, another is in another geographic zone. One is capable of doing some housing, individual loans or what they call the retail loans, somebody is in corporate loans. So we look at the complementarity of all this and then see that when you create a merged entity, amalgamated entity, it is able to cater to all banking products which are required. And secondly, you have banks, you require banks of some size in this country to tackle difficult times when they come. They will be in a position to tackle because they will be having huge banks always have the ability to manage those kind of difficulties. Of course, one would say that too big to fail is another issue which can systemically you have a problem, but then for international operations, for looking into all kinds of products, we need some big banks, and in that sense amalgamation of these three banks is something which is necessary in my view.
Right, sir. Ma'am, how will this merger help these individual banks given the fact that Dena Bank is already under RBI's PCA framework?
So, you see, our Dena Bank has for a couple of years now been in what is called the intensive care unit of the RBI because its books had got eroded so much by loans that were not getting repaid. It was prevented by the RBI from giving out new loans.
That's right.
But at the same time, its expenses continued. It has 15,000 employees. It has deposits, and when it was by being in the PCA, it was quarantined. So the risk from its books was not spreading to the rest of the system. But at the same time, keeping it in the ICU did not recover its health. And because of that, I think what they have done is they have decided to merge it with two other banks that are relatively better performing. Vijaya Bank is a smaller bank, but it is the only bank that made profits in 2017-18 and paid a dividend to the government out of all the other public sector banks. And Bank of Baroda is also a relatively better performing bank and a bigger bank. When you merge these entities, I think the hope is that the work culture the work culture in Dena Bank will improve. By absorbing their losses onto the other bank books, the capital buffer that had got eroded for Dena Bank, that would be taken care of. As Mr. Gopalan says, this is, I think, more of a hope. We don't know if it will work out like that because I have a certain concern here. Mm-hmm. My concern is that what is the message that is being sent out? You're sending a message, number one, that if a bank like Vijaya Bank performs well and is the only bank in a sea of losses and bad loans, you will get penalized and you will be asked to absorb or work along with, lose your identity in an entity you will be asked to bail out a bad performing bank. The second message that goes out is that we know from news reports, Bank of Baroda was first asked to absorb Dena Bank, and the bank said no. It is only then that as an incentive they were given the option of also merging into their operations the Vijaya Bank, and what that means is that people sitting in Delhi in the Mantralaya are taking commercial decisions which should ideally be taken on very commercial and business minded basis by bank boards and bank management. these banks are listed banks. They have minority shareholders. Is this the signal that we want to send out, that this is the way our banks will be taking decisions and we will do business? Are we increasing the role of government, or are we decreasing the role of government? That is the second message that goes out. I don't know if this is really a solution, or if this is persisting in the problem.
Mr. Gopalan, how would you respond to her concerns?
Well, I mean, anybody can always say that, I mean, you're penalizing a good bank. You can always say that, I mean, you are sending a message that, I mean, if you are not caring for other minority shareholders in taking a decisions and not allowing these decisions to organically come from down below and not imposed from above. Well, these are all very, I would say, very important points. We cannot brush them aside, these points. But I would still think that if you look at an overall landscape of the banks in this country, if you need about 4 or 5 big banks and a number of, I mean, mid-sized banks and small regional banks, if you want banking system to have this kind of a structure in this country, I am looking at a larger picture, and therefore I would think that if the banks refuse to merge, the merger has been going on since 2007-8, people have been talking about it, and nothing has happened. So if that doesn't happen, and if you think this is required for this country at this point in time, it's well worth taking that kind of a decision. But once again, there are challenges in implementing this decision. Now we should focus on how those challenges can be addressed, handled, and how much of bandwidth will be given to the management to address those challenges. That is going to be very, very critical and important.
So how will this move benefit the consumers or customers of bank?
Well, if you look at the customers and consumers, I would say that, I mean, if technologically the banks become more savvy, if they are able to ensure that bulk of the people are brought into front end and back end number of people are reduced because of the core banking solution very effectively technologically being implemented. Incidentally, all the 3 banks are the same software, financial software by Infosys, given by Infosys. And if you are able to have the systems and processes, there are 2 things that are very important. The systems in the banking, this thing is that, I mean, suppose some decisions are taken at the AGM level, regional level, some decisions are taken at zonal level, some decisions are taken at centralized. No. Now, if you have similar system, introduce similar systems across all these banks, and also look at the processes, I mean, how they, I mean, carry out the when merged banks, I mean, do the one bank process, whether it is going to be absorbed by others or going to have a common process to be evolved. If you look at all, if you are able to do all those things, possibly I would think that, I mean, it's going to benefit the consumer in a longer, I mean, in a period of time as we go along. It's certainly going to be beneficial to the consumers, but all these things have to be done.
Coming to you, ma'am. Now, the government has asserted that there would be no adverse impact on the interests of the employees. How will be the interest of the employees protected?
I don't know. I think when you work in the public sector, your interests are always protected because you can go and strike and bring banking services to a halt. But the point is that do we want a meritocracy? After all, if a bank was not performing well and despite the RBI's intensive care, it could not recover, should we be offering this kind of protection to Dena Bank employees? There has to be merit. They have to be differentiated on the basis of merit. I'm not saying all employees of Dena Bank are non-performing. There may be some who are good performers. I personally, I am not in favor of a system where we give these kind of guarantees to en masse to employees of non-performing entities, whether banks or other PSUs or even private sector companies, where your job security has absolutely no link to your performance. So I differ with that.
Okay.
I have an answer to this
yes,
point.
Sir. Please go ahead.
You see, what I mean, well, it's well taken. The Puja's point is very well taken. Nobody can have any doubt on this. But look at what the future is likely to be. When you find that, I mean, when more functions geographically have to be handled, you have more technologically savvy businesses to be done.
Yes.
Okay. And when the staff strength in these banks has been eroded over a period of time due to voluntary VRS schemes. Now, I believe that it is possible to manage these issues in a very holistic manner. Once again, it requires a lot of effort. It's not that it is going to be very easy.
I'm sure.
It's not going to be easy. It's going to take time for the merger to take place. It takes time for the systems and processes and technology to be put in place on a uniform, pedestal. All those things are going to take time. But in my view, it can be done. But the question, as she says, why Dena Bank? I would also say that, are the Dena Bank people responsible? The people down below, are they responsible, or the top management which was there over a period of time has led the bank to this particular thing? This is an issue which needs to be debated. So until we have a finality on this particular question, I would still say that yes, you make the people trained, get the HR systems in place, get them trained in all this, in forex, risk management, appraisal of infrastructure projects. There are a lot of things on which the banks have to beef up their HR. You get those things done, and this is an opportunity, in my view, for the banks to get that done. I think, it's a good experiment. One should go ahead with this.
Yeah, so
challenges are immense, and I would only require that the bank senior management is given that kind of a leeway to get this implemented. There are two other points I wanted to mention also, which you may cover later, but I would mention this, is that the CRAR of this bank's merged entity is not that great, though it passes the minimum standards. So to beef up the CRAR of these banks now at this point in time, 2019 March, it comes 11.5 is the minimum. One needs to have the tier 1. So we need to do some capital infusion, equity infusion into these banks, which government has to do. That is, government cannot shy away from doing this particular thing. Second, NPAs are NPAs. These banks have to manage the NPAs. That's a problem, but they'll have to do this. And they are taking efforts to do at this point in time. Maybe they'll have to, because of the new scenario, they may be enthused to do more to see that, these NPAs are addressed in a holistic manner as we go along. I think I'll stop at this.
I'll just give you the last comments. Do you think that this merger would improve the lending ability and propel investments?
The lending ability of these banks?
Of the merged entity?
Well, Puja says about the prompt corrective action of the Dena Bank, which had a problem in lending. Yes, Vijay Bank is always, a better bank compared to among the three in terms of financial metrics. It should, in my view, enable the bank, the merged entity, to get into lending in a more logical manner, provided the economy is in a position to absorb that kind of lending as we go along. The economy should have the need to absorb those, and if there is a condition available outside, capacity utilization improves in the economy, and the entrepreneurs are willing to take start new projects, obviously the lending will go up, and this merged entity will not have the shackles of the PCA to prevent them from doing the lending. I think they will have a better environment to do the lending when the chance arises.
Point well taken. Thank you so much for joining us. So the respective bank boards will now consider this proposal and prepare a scheme for merger. Time for a short break. On the other side, we'll look at the Smart Fence pilot project. Welcome back. You're watching Policy Watch. Now we'll take a closer look at the Smart Fence pilot project. India's first Smart Fence pilot project was launched by Home Minister Rajnath Singh along the Indo-Pak border in Jammu. This will detect, identify and foil any penetration bid. The Smart Fence will keep an eye on the ground, in the air, under the ground and under the water. The target is to seal the borders to stop infiltration and illegal migration. And for more on this, I'm joined by Lieutenant General Vinod Bhatia, retired, former Director General of Military Operations, and also Mr. Ajay Banerjee, Defence Correspondent, the Tribune. Welcome to Rajya Sabha Television, gentlemen. Let me begin by asking you, sir, please demystify and deconstruct Smart Fence pilot project for our viewers. What exactly are smart fences?
See, if I was to take an overview, India is a large country. We have over 1500 kilometers of land borders and 7500 kilometers of our coastline. And two of our major borders with China and part of with Pakistan are disputed borders. And in all these borders, land borders, major threats from across the borders are in terms of, these are porous borders actually, and then high altitude terrains, then jungle terrain, riverine terrain, and desert terrain, semi-desert terrain, and of course the plains of Punjab also. So you find that there are threats which are there. threats of border management are there, border defense are there, border protection are there. Now there is a difference between the three, subtle differences between the three. So what you find is along the Bangladesh border, which is with Bangladesh we share the largest border, 4,096 kilometers. That is the largest border. Most of us don't know that. And there are threats of immigrants coming this side for economic reasons mainly. We have smugglers, we have FICN which is coming in from there, we have drug peddling going on, so on and so forth. So all these threats are there. How do we manage our borders? How do we secure ourselves? It takes a lot of resource in terms of manpower, in terms of time, and the borders are such located that the weather is generally bad out there. It's adverse weather. So we need all weather border management, and we need to exploit technology for this. So what smart fences are doing is, we have fences all over. Bangladesh border, except for 1,000 kilometers, about 3,000 kilometer fences there. Along the Indo-Pakistan border, we have the LC fence, which you call the line of control fence, and then we have a fence across the borders in Punjab, Rajasthan, and Gujarat. So we have these fences on these two borders. So what these fences are doing is basically checking immigrants, checking infiltration also, checking smugglers also, and whole lot of other activities, illegal activities take place. And these are very costly to man in terms of resource. Smart fences is exploring technology to give us all-weather surveillance, to man these, to make sure the threats which are there do not manifest. We stop illegal immigration, we stop smuggling, we stop which is illegal border trade, we stop drug peddling which goes on out here, we stop FICN for coming in, that's a fake Indian currency notes coming in. So all these things are there. So we need smart fences with that. The technology is really advanced. We have not kept pace with it. Now we are doing it both along the India-Pakistan border and along the India-Bangladesh border. There are riverine terrains. You have to use camels in along the Indo-Pakistan border for the desert terrain, and in the riverine terrain you got to use boats, and on the land you got to use manpower to patrol the whole thing. So I think the smart fences is the answer for tomorrow.
Mr. Banerjee, how much dependence would the smart fences reduce on physical patrolling and not expose our Jawans to enemy fire?
See, I'll break it down further, as General Bhatia has pointed out. First of all, the border with Pakistan, 749 kilometers of the line of control and 197-98 kilometers of international border in Jammu and Kashmir. It's easily classified as a hostile border. There is an incident happening almost every day. Though we are not in a state of war with Pakistan, but it's a pretty hostile border. Now, just referring to Jammu, Kashmir and Punjab, where the population is very close to the border, there are around 45 points which are considered vulnerable. By vulnerable, I mean, as you know, the top of the Himalayas, the rivers flow down from the Himalayas towards Pakistan. Now, these hills are very low in height, and during the monsoons, the river flow is very rapid. And those rivers cannot be fenced. There can be no fence, as we know the fence which runs all along. It's an electrified fence which runs all along. But in the riverine segments, there can be no fence. That's in the upper parts of Punjab and also in Jammu and Kashmir. Now, what to do in these riverine segments? There has to be a laser wall or something to see it. The smart fence has to be integrated with this to see this across the river. You just cannot have people sitting 24/7. It's impossible to stop movement of terrorists who want to come in. Please keep in mind there were around more than 300 incidents of infiltration from Pakistan into Jammu and Kashmir. So I'm just referring to those two segments of the border, 197 kilometers of the international border in Jammu and 749 kilometers along the line of control in Jammu and Kashmir. Now what happens is, you have to have some technology to stop this, especially in the riverine segments and in segments where there can be no fence. For example, if there is a deep valley, how will you put a fence out there? The fence will blow away in the monsoons. Similarly, in the northern parts of Punjab, in Gurdaspur and also in Amritsar, where the river flow is zigzag and the river virtually goes across the border and comes back each time. Now, when this happens, you have to have technology to come in. The smart fence will reduce the dependency on physical patrolling in Jammu and Kashmir, lower parts of Jammu, and also along the line of control, upper parts of line of control, where we talk of Kupwara and Karen sector. It will stop this dependency on physical patrolling. That's for reality of the thing.
Mr. Bhatia, how much security cover would smart fences increase on the inclement terrain?
No, it is a force multiplier. The smart fence is not going to do away with the manpower at all. The deployment would still be there because someone has to take a decision what to do. Smart fences are a force multiplier in the sense they are the eyes and ears. There will be sensors out there. There's like an invisible electronic wall out there, and all the feeds they come into a data center where someone sits out there and he now directs the people to go and react in a particular place. So like Mr. Banerjee was saying, We have infiltration attempts from across the line of control along the, in J&K and also on the international boundary in Jammu and Kashmir. So one is the infiltrators. That is a very, very major threat. The infiltration attempts take place almost on a daily basis, and these we cannot allow. And the smart fences will allow us a better counter-infiltration grid. We got a very effective one, but it will be better still. Then we have the India-Pakistan border where smuggling also takes place, and other, terrorists also do come across. It's not that, Gurdaspur happened, they came across from this riverine terrain. So you find that this has to be a good mix of the traditional method of, patrolling our borders and exploiting smart technology, smart fences to make sure that we are more effective, we are better prepared, and we make sure that our, infiltrators do not come across. Immigration doesn't take place, smuggling does not take place. It's not only infiltration. Infiltration happens mainly in one part of this thing, that's about 740 odd kilometers of line of control. But then there are many other threats also. We have to make sure that these things do not happen and our country remains secure. Coastline is another major area.
Exactly.
Mumbai happened 26/11. That happened from the coastline. So we find that the threat along the coastline is also manifesting, and these are also related to terrorism. These are also related to we have a blue economy. They come and they come as fishermen. It's very difficult to patrol all these areas. So we need 24-hour surveillance. We need surveillance like on the coastlines. We need underwater surveillance. We need overground surveillance. We got unmanned ground sensors, which are placed out there. If someone comes, there are problems. So it's not so easy because along our borders, there are animals also coming across. Then there are our own people who live very close to the border. So they also stray into these areas, these grey areas as I call them, where the terrorists use. Our people actually in Punjab and all are, the agriculture is going on right up to the boundary pillars on both sides. So we have to see that they are not inconvenienced also. So it is not only the convenience of the security forces or the border management forces, it is also the convenience of the people out there. So if we have smart fences out there, if we have smart technologies, we exploit them, I think it will be beneficial to the security needs, the border management needs, and also to the people out there.
Mr. Banerjee, plans are afoot to expand this project. Any specific challenge that you foresee?
Money. That will be the first challenge because it will cost the equipment, and especially when technology grows, it brings in, when new technology comes in, it costs a lot of money, especially when we talk of underground sensors, which we're talking about. Now some sensors are coming in which can differentiate between an animal movement and a human movement. See, when a man is sitting with a gun in his hand and he is having an image of a thermal imager in front of him, it is sometimes difficult to make out if it's an animal or a human being. Now the reaction immediately starts that he is seeing something, but could be an animal also. Very close to the boundary, there are villages on both sides, very close to the boundary, where animals are kept by the local population on both sides. Now what happens is when this technology comes in, now these sensors will be, new sensors will be able to differentiate between a man and an animal. That will give an edge to the person who's patrolling and who's on the ground looking after the security of the border. The second point comes in, how do you do overhead patrolling? Overhead patrolling has to be with a mix of sensors, cameras and drones. Drones, I mean unarmed drones.
Yes.
Now, these will be a mix and match of technology which will provide a clear picture to the commander sitting in the background. Now, we have just done with the Pakistan, we have just done 5.5 kilometers, if I'm not wrong, and something we have done in Dhubri in Assam with Bangladesh. Now, this costs a lot of money, and also this will please include the cost. It will need 24/7 power supply. That will need generators. It will need trained manpower to read those systems, which means a different kind of level of technology is coming in. We need a different level of training for people to handle it. And it also means that it will also have a new kind of system, more land has to be acquired, and that money, I believe it will be around 100 crores just for 5 kilometers types. So you can imagine if we do so long, it will be a huge cost. Of course, it will be done through a long number of years, but money I am sure the government will allocate for such a project, because this infiltration has to stop, because the better we stop at the LOC or the international border, that is the best option we have with Pakistan at the moment.
So I'll give you the last comments. This project is highly successful in countries like USA and Israel. Any specific lesson for India?
Yes, we have gone and seen the smart fence in Israel. It's very, there were 6-tier fence. It is not only, when you talk of smart fence, it is not only a single fence. It is in tiers, so that you know what's happening. This was successful there, but then their terrain is different. Their threats are different. In our case, the terrain is vast. We have from the high altitude to the sea level, you find all types of terrain. Our inclement weather is there. Then our population density along the border areas is quite elevated. Like I said, we should make these fences have to also people friendly. We can't unnecessarily put our own people at risk or make their life uncomfortable. We have to take them on board also, and this costs a huge amount of money. And where's that money going to come from is a major question. But it is a need. We have to do it. We may do it over a longish sort of a period. We have a mix initially, and once we started it, and it's just started now, I'm sure it'll grow, it'll catch up, and it'll be very beneficial to the border management forces out there. It is the technology we need to exploit. We cannot run away from technologies. We need to actually absorb them. It'll need HR policies being changed. Our recruitment patterns will have to change. It'll need a whole lot of, it'll have to be a whole lot of union approach. We'll have to see everything because you see, the center is responsible for some part, the state is also responsible for some parts. So we'll have to make sure that we have everything in place to ensure an effective border management system. It is a comprehensive integrated border management system, CIBMS. And it has to be a comprehensive system, and it has to be low cost as it can be, and people friendly.
Thank you, gentlemen, for joining us. So performance of the pilot projects would be monitored and the system will be made foolproof. So that's all we had in this edition of Policy Watch. Thanks for watching and stay tuned to Rajya Sabha Television.